Thank you. Thank you guys for letting me come and spend some time with you. It feels really weird. Inspiration, no. Main event, no. I'm not either of those two things. What I really am, honestly, learning. I'm learning how to turn off the lights a little bit. Maybe a little more. That's good. I need mood lighting. I really am truly in the learning mode, and I want to make sure that you understand that when I first come up here, I'm in the learning mode. I'm trying to figure things out. Honestly, I think I've been in the learning mode my whole life. But when you make a big change like this, it's like you're really in the learning mode. I think I've been here 4 months, 8 days, and about 3 hours, and really knew very little about Texas. Nothing against you guys. I really didn't even know your school district existed. I mean, I really didn't know that. I was really in my own little bubble where I was, doing as good a work as I could do there. And then I landed here. And what we're going to do today, if it's okay with you, is 2 things. First of all, the first third of this is going to be very similar to what Dr. Wellman would do in the state of the district, because I always think you always kind of keep people in the same mode. And I don't want to miss any of that stuff because I think it's very important. The last 2/3, I'm taking a twist. And I'm going to share some thoughts that I have a little bit after I've kind of had a little time to digest things. But I will tell you, I have not figured it out completely. Is that okay? So first, let's just kind of go through just some points of pride. You have a fabulous district. We always start out talking just quickly. We do have a mission statement. Put that up there, make sure people know that. We actually do have a Board of Education too. And we want to put that up there. And I always put their pictures up and their names, and one of them happens to be here. That's Bo, and your parent of children district, and here in particular. So I know, Bo, you've seen this presentation. I know you have to leave at some point, so when you go, it's not that he's really mad at me and walking out. He's just walking out because he's seen this a couple times. So I first started learning about the district in Nashville, Tennessee. Okay. So I was at a superintendent's conference, and this friend of mine walks up to me and says, there's some guys here recruiting for a district that would really be a good match for you. And I said, not interested. And then another person completely different came up and said the same thing to me. And I said, I'm really not interested. Because I was really happy where I was, honestly. I didn't even know what school, I didn't know where it was, didn't know anything. And then somebody said, well, you really should look at this district. So they gave me the name, and I went in my hotel room, and for 6 hours I researched you. And I just looked at everything that was written in newspapers, on your websites, on other people's blogs, just to learn about the district. And you're good. You're really good. So I'm going to go through a lot of slides, and this is kind of the stuff that I kind of found when I was looking around. Your schools score very well on all the state tests, and you're really high ranked in terms of Texas. You see those rankings come out in newspapers. You had the highest ACT score in the school's history, okay, this last year in Westlake's history, and the highest SAT score. That's pretty impressive. And by the way, I've done this presentation to different schools with the teachers, as well as different parents, the Rotary. We're setting it up for the chamber. We're going to do it different places, different pieces of it. It changes a little bit. But whenever I talk about this, and I talk about Westlake High School, I'm talking about the first grade teacher, the third grade teacher, and all of them. My mom was a first grade teacher. My sister was a fourth grade teacher. If they don't do their jobs well, you don't get good SAT and ACT scores. It just doesn't happen, okay? So you've got to give a nod to all of them. It's a team effort to get to that point. That gets you ranked by different outside organizations. They use this test scores. They use other things as well to rank you. You rank well. You have a high percentage of your kids headed off to colleges, which is wonderful. You also have a lot of your students that are recognized as National Merit finalists. This is a number that's kind of an interesting number. You may not know it, or you may not know it, but we are in a consortium with 8 other high schools across the United States. Public high schools that many consider some of the best high schools in the United States. Just if you want to know a few of them, Manhattan Beach in California, Palo Alto, Edina in Minnesota. I don't know if you know these names mean anything. There's a high school in Greenwich, Connecticut. There's one in Chicago, north of Chicago, Winnetka. It's New Trier. And when we look at this, we survey our graduates, they survey theirs, we do it as one group. We look at the data, what are our graduates saying compared to theirs, how many National Merit finalists do we have, what's our ACT, what's our SAT, how are you doing this, how are you doing that, trying to learn from one another, and we rank very well with those very high-performing high schools, and you should know that. That means our kids are able to get some money to help them go to college, which is also great. I'm going through these fast. You're good in athletics. You really are. You're very, very good. Okay? Let's forget the game against Lake Travis a couple weeks ago, but you're good in athletics. Okay? You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You win a lot more than you lose. You're very good in the arts. And you know, this is important to me. You can look at me and you'll come to a real quick conclusion. He was not an athlete. Okay? And it's true. I was not an athlete. I wasn't. I was awful. Absolutely awful. The thing that saved me in high school was band. It really did, because I connected with a group of people. And when you're a kid in a school, and look at the research on co-curriculars, particularly high school, kids who participate in co-curriculars, whether it's athletic or non-athletic, doesn't matter, are much more likely to be successful in life. Because there's a lot of skills that you learn in those different endeavors that are helpful. And you guys have a wide variety of things for kids to get involved in, and you do well at them. Your AP scores are well. We check this out with that consortium as well. Are we doing as well as they're doing? I will tell you, in my mind, looking at this early, there's some places that I would like to at least examine and potentially tweak the sequencing of a couple of your courses. I think your kids do well. I think there's a couple of places we might be able to make a few little changes that it could even be better. Okay? That's okay. You have exceptional staff. It's funny. When it started becoming public in the Chicago area that I was coming here, I got calls from friends all over Chicago. And one of them was, "You have Carl Hooker down there." And I go, "Carl." And I started doing research. Yeah, and he's considered one of the best in his field right now in terms of technology. And there's bumps in technology in every school district, but it's good to have good people like that. But as I've been walking around, watching teachers, meeting with principals, the quality of your staff is very good. That's extremely important, okay? This is kind of just the demographics of your staff, okay, the people who work here. We always mention the Teacher of the Year, and this is another one. As soon as we won, as soon as I got, not won, no, he has won so many contests, but as soon as I was named to this, my robotics teacher at Barrington High School came running up to me and said, "You've got Norman there." And I go, "Norman?" And Norman had beat him in St. Louis at a big competition, so he knew exactly who he was. He says, "Westlake has a great robotics program." I don't know if you know, the kids in this program have a patent on one of their apps that they have, and they're selling it. They sold it to about 150 different schools across the country already. I mean, this is a fantastic thing. It's like a real-life learning that is good for kids to be involved in. EEF, we basically raise a lot of money to support, what you do here, and that's fabulous. So I learned all these things, and I've been learning all these things, and I think of the district, and I've been here for a couple months, so I'm going in the wrong direction. Let's go here. And, how that happened, sorry about that. I must have pressed the wrong thing. I'm going to get you where I want to be. And when I think of the district, I think of this picture. And I think this is really important. I really do think of this picture, okay? So I want you to imagine that you're somewhere alone, okay, at home, so teachers, I tell teachers you're in your classroom, and this guy walks into your room, right? He smiles, and you look at him, and you might think, nice sport coat. Right? Well, I don't know what you're thinking, but nice sport coat, nice hair, looks like he's got nice teeth, you probably stare into his eyes and you'd go, nice eyes, Most people say it's a good-looking guy, right? For the most part? Okay. And when I think of the district, I think about that. Strong test scores, good arts, right? Good athletics. You are great facilities. You really have some beautiful things going on here. Good professional development, great staff, okay? Technology, you're moving in the right direction. Technology will always have some bumps, but you're moving in the right direction. Life is good. But if you were looking at George, and after you complimented him on all those things, you'd probably ask him a question. And that would be, what happened to the hand? Maybe you get to that point. What happened to the hand? And so as I've been talking to people and studying the district and studying Texas, one of the things the board said, you need to meet with people. I met with between 100 and 150 people, one-on-one, for between 1 hour and 3.5 hours. Sometimes people have a lot to tell you. Okay? And you just listen. And in the course of that, I met with many fans of the district, a couple skeptics, and a couple critics, and that's okay. I've also been studying how you do things in Texas. Okay? And Texas is different than Illinois, and that's life. It's just different. I'm not saying any better, any worse, just different. When you're new to a new environment, you have to learn the environment. Make sense? And one of the things, as I saw lots of really good things, now here's where we twist a little bit, I did see something with the hand, and I started thinking to myself, you know, what's going on with the finances a little bit? Okay? And I talked to the board, and I said, I really want to take a really good look at your 5-year financial projection model. Okay? And while they had an intuitive one in terms of where they were going, and some of them understood it pretty well, there wasn't anything that I could really grab onto and really, really look at and really study. So one of the things I said is, I want to build one. Now, if I'm going to tell you something, on some of this stuff, if I'm wrong, I'm fine being wrong. I like to be wrong. I'm still in the learning mode. Does that make sense? And we'll give our spreadsheets to anyone, and you tweak the spreadsheets and tell me where I'm wrong, because that's good for me. It's kind of a strange thing to say, but that's good for me. So I want to kind of start out really, first of all, with something I believe. And you can agree with it or disagree with it, but let's not argue about it right now. Is that okay? So I believe you want a stable education system. I believe you want stability in education. I think that's good for kids. I think that's good for teachers. I think that's good for parents. I just believe that. And to me, there are 4 items with that that are pretty important. I'm going to put all 4 up, and then I'm just going to talk about them all at once, if that's okay. And these are the 4. So, I come from a family of educators. I strongly believe, number 1, you have to get great staff in your buildings, get them there and keep them. Keep the really good ones. Okay, you really need to do that. You can look at all the research. It will tell you the most important thing to have a school be successful is to have a highly educated, highly qualified teacher standing in front of the kids who can connect with them. That is number 1. And think of your own experience. That you need to do. And if you can't keep those good people, you're going to get in trouble over time. Okay? Number 2, they've got to be in a room that isn't falling apart. You know, if the ceiling's caving in on them, they have troubles, right? If it's way too cold or way too hot, they have troubles. Make sense? So you need a good environment. 3rd, you have to have reasonable class sizes. We can argue what the exact number is, but you have to have reasonable class sizes. I don't know what everyone in the room does, but I would argue no matter what you do for a living, if I put enough on top of you, I can make you less effective. I just believe that. And for teachers, sometimes that's class size. Okay? Finally, I think if you're going to have programs, if you're going to put a program in, you have to have the support for it, and you have to have a commitment to it for a period of time. Things can change, but you should have a commitment to it for a period of time, or else you're wasting money and you're wasting people's time. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example of that really quickly. Okay? First, where I was in Barrington, and then something here. Is that okay? I want to make sure you understand what I mean by this. So in Barrington, at one point, we decided we were going to do Spanish, we call it Spanish dual language, K-12. So the kids would be fluent in Spanish and English by the time they were seniors. And we decided we were going to do Chinese immersion, K-16, with a partnership with the University of Illinois. So the kindergarten, this was a choice program for parents. So the kindergarten student would walk in the first day, kindergarten, speaking no Chinese, and the teacher would only speak to the kid in Chinese for the first half of the day. So the kid would say, I want to go to the washroom, and the teacher would say, direct them to the washroom in Chinese. It sounds crazy. I mean, that really does sound crazy. But it works. The elasticity of the brain when kids are young is amazing in terms of picking up languages and music, by the way, if you want to go back to that picture. But languages, there's really an elasticity of the brain that is there, and you have a window for that. So if you're going to put all the effort in your curriculum, with your teachers, right, and put all that in and buy in with parents, when the kid's in 4th grade, you don't want to pull the program out because you've wasted people's time, right? Now you may over time decide to sunset it out for one reason or another if it isn't working, but if it's working, you keep it going. So you start something only if you think you can support it and keep it going. Here, the district made a decision to invest in technology and do some things, right? So the teachers are adapting their lessons. That takes time, right? And you don't want to put that in with the money it costs and the time it costs and then yank it out. Either put it in and work with it and make it work. Devices will change, trust me. It may not be iPads in 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is, but it'll be something, I think. Okay, I don't know what it'll look like, but it'll be something. But if you're going to do that effort, you put it in. So that's the 4th one that I believe. So these are 4 things that are important to me if you want to be stable. Okay? I see some heads nodding. We can argue that at the end if you'd like on any of the 4 points. I'd be happy to get into a debate on that. Now, if you want that, I will maintain you want to be fiscally stable. Because you can have a beautiful bus or a beautiful car. If there's not gasoline in it, you're not going anywhere. You're just sitting in a car. Okay? And what does that mean to me? To me, that means 2 things. And I try to keep things fairly simple. Okay? And not because of you, just because of me. I really like to think in global pieces. Number 1, you want to match your expenditures to your revenues. Basically, the amount of money you have coming in and going out should be roughly the same. And you think of your household. The amount of money you have coming in and going out should be roughly the same. You'd really like to have a little more coming in than going out. That would be good, but at least equal. If you have a lot more going out than coming in, you're going to be in trouble at some point. Agreed? And then I believe you need something in the bank. You need a bank account. Okay? Something can go wrong, your car breaks down, you want to have some money to be able to fix it if you have to. Okay? Same thing with schools. What this amount is debatable. And we can argue that until the cows come home. Most schools will say get around 25%, but that's a good place to be. 3 months operating, it's a good place to be. If you think about a couple of years ago in Texas, when they pulled out $5.4 billion from the state educational system, by having something in a fund balance, it allows you to react. 2 days before school opened, here in Westlake and in Eanes, I got a call, a text message saying the air conditioner was out in half of the high school. So we didn't have air conditioning. And the thing is, what are we going to do? Fix it. And fix it fast because it was hot. You know, you don't have, and you go to your bank account and you fix it. You just have to fix it. It's really not a choice sometimes. Those things you have to do. Where I was, we had a policy. We tried to stay between 25 and 40%. That's where we tried to stay. If we got over 40%, lower taxes. Okay? If you go under 25%, make an adjustment. But always make sure you have something in the bank. Hopefully that resonates a little bit. So that's what I believe. Now, the next couple of slides I'm going to go pretty fast on because I think they're pretty basic, but you basically get most of your money from property taxes. That's where your income comes from. You can look at these slides many times. I'll put them on the web. You can look at them, but that's pretty much what a district like this looks like. That's where your money goes. Your money basically goes to people. The amount you're spending in the school leadership administration support services is very similar to reference groups. Okay? Very similar. But most of your money goes to people. And that's okay. You're a school district. That's what you want, people. These are the rates. I put this up because I think it is interesting to know. When you look at the districts around us, these are their tax rates at this time. Okay, sorry. Now, your community is very similar to the one I was in. People pay a lot in property taxes. They really do. Why? Even if the rate's low, the assessed evaluation, right, is high, and you multiply that, you get a high number. I get that. I totally get that. But it is interesting to know where you stand in terms of some of these other districts. This slide, to me, is the first time I started thinking to myself, there's something interesting going on here. Okay? This is where I started looking at George Clooney's hand. Okay? And I'm going to explain this one a little bit because I think it really is pretty important. So, whenever you think about doing projections into the future, you have to make some assumptions. You just have to make some assumptions. Last year, the total assessed evaluation for this district went up 9.8%. That is fact. Don't look that, go to the assessor, they'll tell you it went up 9.8%. I'm not making up that number. We asked them, what's it going to do next year? I said, well, I don't know. What do you think it's going to do next year? I said, well, 7, 8%. And they don't know. I get that. They don't know. They really don't know. But they're looking at some history and kind of saying, it looks like it's going to keep going up for a little while. So I had to tell the business office to put something in so I could work into the Texas formulas. So I asked them, I said, go over here, down here, right in this area, and I said, just project it out at 7.5%. Is that okay? So that's what I said, just project it out. Now, we can change that number to anything else if anyone wants to change a number. I don't care. It just changes some of the other numbers. And then I said, okay, what will that do with recapture and Robin Hood? Right now, in total, we're sending about 54% of the local property taxes that we get here, we're sending it to the state. 54%, that's what we send. So you write the check, it comes to us, we write the check, it goes to the state of Texas. Now, that's not terrible in that what they're trying to do is get equity among school districts, and I really do believe in my heart, and in my soul, and in my mind, and everything I grew up with, that your education shouldn't be determined by your zip code. I also do believe that communities should have the right to try to control the type of education that they have for their kids. So it's a really dichotomy that sometimes is difficult. You got to find the right balance. But right now, 54% we send out. If our assessed evaluation keeps going up at 7.5%, by the way, the 54% has been increasing, we will wind up at 63% of the money that we have sending out. Okay? In about 5 years. Why? Why is that? I'm going to get to that. Okay? Well, it's one of those things in calculus where it doesn't, like if you keep going halfway to the wall, you never quite get to the wall, but you get darn close. Like every 10 minutes, and I can go through that a little bit, okay? So let me kind of go back and kind of go through a couple slides that will kind of lead to that, okay? And there's one I still want to get to that's a little more interesting, but this starts getting at it, okay? First of all, in Texas, all dollars aren't created equal. They really aren't, the way your system works. So here, there's a lot of talk about bonds, and people do these things with bonds all the time. Back in my last world, I would never have funded air conditioning, technology, roofs, parking lots, buying buses. I would never have funded that out of a bond. I would have done that out of my general revenue source that was coming in generally with my taxes. Now, by the way, I'm not trying to say in any way Illinois is any better than Texas. It is not. We've had more governors go to jail in Illinois than Louisiana. And that's saying something. And I'm not trying to hurt anyone in Louisiana. Remember, I'm from Illinois. Okay? Our pension system in Illinois, for public workers is almost bankrupt. Okay? There's a lot of problems in Illinois. And the weather we won't even talk about. Okay? It was just a different funding system. There I took in about $120 million in local property taxes for 9,000 students, and I sent nothing to the state. Here I'll take the $120 million, and I'll send about half of it to the state for 8,000 students. So it changes the dynamic. It's just a little different dynamic. In both cases, I didn't get a lot back from the state. Now, it's just the way it works. But here, there is definitely some logic in why a lot of school districts who are property wealthy, who are under recapture or under Robin Hood, go for bonds. And it basically comes to this. If you go for a bond dollar, you basically get a bond dollar. Roughly. There's some interest on the bonds, yes. There's some fees in terms of associated with the bond, but you get, at least you're getting in the neighborhood of it. When you go into this situation, they have locked, and I can get in detail with this if you want to see the real detail on it, but they have locked the assessed evaluation on a particular student in Texas. And every once in a while they adjust it, but for a period of years they do not adjust it. Which means that they hit a certain point and they lock it. And then anything that is increased property value, you get a lower percentage on. So if you're a property owner and you wrote a check, let's say they said your assessed evaluation went up 9% more, and you wrote a check 9% higher than the year previous, 9% higher than the year previous, that difference, whatever that difference is on that dollar, do you know how much we get? And on that dollar, on that increase, we get a nickel. That's what we get. And that's why, because it's on the increased value, and I can get in more detail, but I don't want to get into all this here. That's why over time that 50-something% is going to 60-something%. Okay. Now, if you look at it, I also want to, Wally's here, and I want to make sure, this is again why EEF is out there, and we really push EEF. Same thing there. All dollars aren't created equal. There, a dollar is a dollar. Okay. The other reason I think sometimes you see all this talk about why are you doing all this rental of fields? Why you guys all on turf fields and all this kind of stuff? Why do you talk about that? All of those dollars are a dollar for a dollar. We rent a field, we get a dollar. Okay? We rent the PAC, the Performing Arts Center at the high school, dollar for dollar. That's about $500,000. The fields are about $500,000. That's about $1 million that's coming in. That I get all of that. I don't get it. You get the cotton. I get it. I really don't get it. No one told me about that. No, but I don't get it. But you understand, those dollars do matter, and I think that's why boards have talked about that kind of stuff. I'll get to that in another place. The other way to point this out to the question is, it's the growth in property value that we're not getting that's really hurting us. So, I understand, I've been living around a while, you can see how old I am, but, for the most part, property values have been increasing. Now, I just took a 14-year period, right? And I know there was a dip in property values in there, I get that, but overall, they have gone up over that period of time. In that period of time, I asked the business office, tell me exactly how much money we wrote checks to the state from local property taxes. And the answer is about $750 million. $750 million. Another way of looking at it graphically, if you look at the growth in property taxes over that period of time, you look at the growth in our revenue over that period of time, you have a difference. And the difference between those two is roughly that $750 million. Now, if we didn't send the $750 million, we would have a monorail to everyone's house. In the district, we'd pick the kid up at his window, he'd jump out the window, it would be like Harry Potter. I mean, it would be really cool. Now, honestly, we wouldn't be doing that, but you understand, you can do a lot with $750 million, right? You really could. George wouldn't be worried about his hand. Another way of looking at it, which is really interesting, and Richardson ISD, which I think is outside Dallas somewhere, had this chart, so I said to my business office, if they have a chart, I want a chart. Okay? And the thing that's really interesting about this chart is this is saying how much money are you getting, that is adjusted for inflation over a period of time from state and local that you really have to spend per pupil. And if you look at that number, and you look at that number, over the last 4 years, after you equate for inflation, inflation hasn't been huge. You're basically having less money to spend. And that's where, again, I get a little concerned. I have to keep the fuel in the bus, or try to. Actually, we have to keep the fuel in the bus, not just me. But I do think that's an interesting point. It's, people give me stuff, so somebody gave me that. This is nothing against Texas. And by the way, the cartoon artist who actually put this together, I was told, is the father of a teacher at Eames, which is kind of interesting. I said, well, that's interesting. And again, this is nothing against Texas. Illinois is way up there in terms of funding schools as well. And you've got this constitutional case that's out there right now. You've got a lawsuit. You have all those things going on. But I'm not here to kind of get into a great deal. I'll answer questions about that if you want. But I will tell you, I still believe in that. I still believe that you got to match expenditures to revenues, and you need something in the bank. Okay? So now the math teacher in me is going to come out for a second. I did teach math in the dark ages. Okay? And I like graphs. So I want to talk about this graph for 1 second. Because after I get this graph in your mind, I can just go bam, 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 bam with scenarios. Does that make sense? But I got to first tell you what the graph shows. So what this graph shows is the following. The red line is saying that's the base. That's the 25% fund balance that I don't want to go under. Okay? So if you think about it in your home, you might say, I want to keep at least X in my bank account. Does that make sense? That's my red line. I don't want to go under that. The blue line is how much money I have in the bank. So anytime over time the blue line is going down, anytime it's going down, you're spending more than you're bringing in. Does that make sense? Going to your bank account. Anytime the blue line's going up, right? you're bringing in more money than you're spending, and therefore money's going in the bank account. And if it's flat, you're bringing in about the same amount of money that you're spending. Get the basic concept? So, in theory, if I want to hold to those two premises that I talked about before, I want the blue line to always hover over the red line, okay? Roughly. Now, you can say I want it closer. That's fine. It's just a graphic, okay? You can say I want the red line to be lower because I only want to have a 10% fund balance. That's fine. It doesn't matter to me. You just move it. The concept is the same, okay? Now, remember, if the blue line was going like that, right? You're bringing in so much money that you're not spending. The taxpayers or the parents might be saying, what are you doing with all that money? And that's a great question. But, so, what I did, if I can find my little thing, I went to the business office and I said, I want to see what our graphs look like. This is, again, the first couple months on here. I want to see what our graphs look like. And this may seem stupid, but this is what people like me are supposed to try to figure out once in a while when you're new. And I said, I need to know what your drivers are. What controls the amount of money you get? And so we came up with a chart. And by the way, again, we'll give this thing to anyone who wants it, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so let me tell you first of all what's fact. Kind of fact. Okay? This column is kind of fact. Okay? So let me kind of get that column first, then I'm going to work you through it, and then we're going to go through some things really fast. The TAV, assessed evaluation, did go up about 9.8% last year. Okay? That is our tax rate. That's fact. In terms of our operating rate, 1.04. Number of students, that's not fact. That changes every single day. But we're going, how many kids are we up or down from the previous year? And it's really interesting. I was looking at it yesterday, and we're sharing it with the board in a couple of weeks. We were going up, different years, 100 kids, 70 kids, 125 kids. It was really kind of going all over the place. This year, we're actually going to be probably even or a little down, or maybe a little up, I don't know, but it's going to be very minimal. At one point, it was 7 positive. So I said, I'll put 7 positive in, right? The percent really doesn't matter. You can kind of look at that. 0 is just to get you at a base place in terms of where you're starting with staff, okay? The 1.5%, that is the amount of salary increase just in general we gave to the whole staff last year, 1.5%. And the 4.44% was the amount that the board's contribution increase into that healthcare was last year. That's just fact, okay? I won't argue, please let's not argue too much about that. So I had to get those numbers down that are fact. Then I said, the business office said, well, Tom, you want projections into the future, what do we put in the other columns going forward? And I said, guess. Guess. And so they went 7.5% here. And by the way, you change the numbers, it changes the graph. I get that. I totally get that. I said, let's leave the tax rate where it is. Let's go up 75 students a year. Why 75? Because if I averaged out the last 4 or 5 years, it was about 75. So let's use 75. But if you want to make that 0, I'm fine making it 0. It doesn't matter to me. Okay? Then I said, well, if you're going up 75 kids and you want to keep the reasonable class sizes, you better add staff. Right? So let's put 3.4 staff for every 75 kids. You can argue the number, but just play with me for now, right? And then I said, okay, what do we do with salaries? I said, just have it go out 1.5%. Don't change anything so we don't get into any predictions. He's saying this or he's saying that. Okay?
Sorry.
But just don't worry about it. It might be me. Don't worry about it. Now, I will tell you, in terms of these 2 percentages going out, they quasi-concern me a little bit because anytime the running rate, and I'm not talking necessarily this year, but the 10-year average on CPI, rolling average has been about 2.2, 2.225. If your salary increases are going up less than the rate of inflation over time, attracting and retaining staff can be problematic. I do believe that. But we have to put something in. So I put something in. By the way, the things down here, don't worry too much about this number on this alpha report. That's just facility stuff, air conditioner, stuff like that. We're kind of drilling through that. This number is fairly accurate. If you want to keep your technology just going, because every time you buy technology, like a car, anytime you buy technology, it's in a death cycle. It's going to die. How many people are using the same computer they had in 1985? No. I mean, it's going to die. Now, it's going to die in 3 years, 5 years. We can debate that, but it's going to die. So this kind of keeps the technology going at a rate that we think it probably needs to go. This right now are things that could be funded by bond. They will not be in my graphs. If they are not funded by bond, they will go into my graph, some of them, or we won't have them. Technology we have to pay for when we need to replace it, or we won't have it, right? Same thing, when the air conditioner goes out, we'll either fix it, or now I'm not saying we would do all this, but we would do some of it. There's some things we would probably have to do, and that's again a board decision working with the administration to decide what you do. So I said, okay, use all those assumptions, right? This last item, by the way, I didn't talk about. This is just thinking, okay, heating, air conditioning, book supplies, paper. We're going to just let it go up 1% a year, just to have some number in there thinking those things are going to go up. It's not the biggest part of our budget. The biggest part of our budget is people. I told you that, right? That's where the money is in terms of the budget, in terms of expenditures. So I said, throw all that into the Texas system, show me my graph, that's my graph. Okay? That's my graph. If you're spending more per year than you're bringing in, whether you look at your bank account or not, something's happening. Something is still happening. Whether I show you the graph or not, there's still something happening. Now, I want you to think of an airplane. The red line is the landing strip. The blue line is the plane you're in. Okay? The goal is to hover the plane over the landing strip. You still with me? That's the goal. Just kind of come in smooth. That's the goal. Just kind of keep it in your mind there. So I said to the business office, I don't like that. Fix it. It's not easy to do, right? So they walked out of the room and they said, well, we'll toy with something. And the first thing they said is, well, we need to get more gas in the plane. Okay? So I said, okay, get more gas in the plane. How are you going to do that? I said, well, let's try this. I don't throw anything. They said, we'll raise the tax rate from 104 to 106 in those 3 years as we go out. Right now, the interesting thing in Texas, again, is those 2 extra pennies from 104 to 106. It makes no sense to go to 107. But when you get to 104 to 106, those 2 pennies in Texas are called golden pennies. They are not subject to recapture.
Any 2 cents?
No. No, it's 2 cents.
Well, I mean, it increases.
Yeah, that increase, whatever dollar amount that was, would not be subject to recapture. And that's one of the ways Texas set up so communities could make an adjustment if they wanted to control what they had in their community versus the equity piece. It's a very interesting concept. But you could do it. I mean, it could happen, right? And if you did that, I said, okay, let's just model it. We're not actually raising anyone's taxes. That takes a vote, right? So we're not actually doing anything to anyone. But let's at least see what would happen. And that's what happens. Better. Really is actually significantly better if you look at it. But you're still heading, in essence, over time in the wrong direction. Now, if I just went out and said raise taxes, how many of you want to raise their taxes? Raise your hand. Okay, I don't either. Yeah, if I just went and said just raise taxes, solve the problem, people would go, there's a bus going to Chicago tomorrow. Goodbye to you. That's okay. It's cold there, but it's okay. Which I understand, you can't just say that. So one of the things I think you should know, we are talking with the board and we brainstormed about 20-something other ideas on how to raise money that are not connected with raising taxes, get more money into the system. Now of the 20-something ways, I will tell you, I think about 10 are illegal. But you do that in brainstorming sessions, and that's okay. But they may be illegal because they don't allow public institutions to do certain things. It's just part of the way, and that's okay. But we're going to research it, figure out what's legal, what's not legal. There's probably about 3 or 4 others that are nice ideas, but for the effort, they're not going to raise any kind of money that is worth raising the money. Me with a lemonade stand out there is just not going to do it, okay? But you get the concept, right? But there are some ideas, I think there's like 4 or 5 ideas that might have potential, that might actually raise some money. I mean, renting PAC, doing the fields, that actually does raise some serious money. That's serious money. $1 million a year, that's serious money, and can help you. So we are talking about that as well. So I then went to the business office and I said, how else can you get the plane out? And they said, well, you can throw stuff out of the plane. I see your face. Yeah, but it's when you're going to have the conversations, you have to have the conversations. So I said, show me what it looks like. And I said, go work and show me what it looks like. I want a nice graph. And they said, well, let's try this. Here's what they did. They kept the rate going up, a little more fuel. They decided while the students are going up, we're not going to add 3.4 staff. We're going to let 5 go each year. Now, when I say let staff go, it doesn't mean teachers necessarily. Okay, it could be some teachers, it could be some administrators, it could be some custodians, it could be some this, some that. You got it? I'm talking just in general because we all cost money. One of the problems that you have, no matter what, you're probably going to have a principal in this school. Sorry. You're probably going to have a superintendent. Well, you really are, okay? And you get down to it, the vast majority of your employees are teachers. So when you start looking at it, yes, some of them are probably going to be teachers. I said, okay, don't go up 1.5%, just go up 1%. Remember, attracting and retain. Don't give as much into healthcare, kind of cut that percentage down, okay? And that again, maybe in the attract, retain issue. By the way, this is a swing of 8.4, if you think about it, right? Was 3.4 up, now it's 5 down. Got that concept, kind of keep that in your brain. If this number is going up and that number is going down, you're not maintaining reasonable class sizes over time. It's impossible. Okay? It is impossible. The denominators and numerators aren't working for it. Now, if we were losing 400 kids a year, that should be a negative number. Okay? You have less kids, you need less staff. Okay? But the nice thing about it is the graph. But nice graphs can hide lots of pain. And I want to make sure I'm aware of that. Because the graph is pinned to different assumptions in the model. Now, I do want to say this because this is important. In the last district I was in, I did have to go through some difficult situations. We had to cut $3.5 million out of our operating rate one year and like $1 million something out of another year. We then negotiated, right as I was leaving, I was trying to get a lot of stuff done. We negotiated a 4-year contract we had collective bargaining with labor unions. And we have left that district with 2 lines going like that for the next 4 years, barring something strange happening. And that gives you the stability. The average class size there, by the way, is about right where your average class size is on all 3 levels. So it's very similar in many ways. And the academic performance and programs are very similar. But it still is somewhere in this graph. Now, if something happens, if we decide we're not funding technology here, right, we're going to move that up here, we've got to equate it into our graph, right? Or we're not going to do technology. If we're going to decide, and I'm not owning any of these numbers. I want, this is not me. This is what the board and I and different people in the community got to decide. Which of those numbers do you want to change to some degree? But in the end, you probably are going to have a graph, whether you like it or not, one exists. So I want you to keep that image in your mind because I think that is connected to this to some degree. And I also want to throw this up there quickly. From the last data I have, about 68% of the community does not have kids in the schools here. That's not abnormal. Most districts I've been in, Highland Park, Illinois, Deerfield, Illinois. I was on the school board in Lake Forest, Illinois. I was in Barrington. We were all around somewhere between high 60s to mid 70s% without kids in the school. That's the way it is. But I think sometimes the school district still for a community is the uniting force. It's the only thing that a lot of them have somewhat in common in some way or another. Okay? We want to make sure that we can connect with people when we have good news to share, bad news to share, whatever the news to share is, because it is their district. You can go to that website, which you try to make as simple as you can, and anybody can type their email address in, and you can get emails with goofy stuff like me and a pumpkin contest. Or you can also get stuff when there's, some bad weather situation going on or whatever. And by the way, your definition of bad weather and my definition of bad weather are totally different definitions of bad weather. I thank you for your time. I want you to also keep that image in your mind because I do think it does reflect you. I could have come here honestly and just told you how wonderful you were. I really could have, and I could have had the cinnamon things there and the coffee. You're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. I believe you're wonderful. I really do believe you're wonderful. I really do. But it would be Pollyanna, in my opinion, not to say where I think we might have some things we need to talk about or think about. Okay, I think that's just disingenuous, and that's not the way I work. When I talk to the teachers here, I will honestly tell them, I cannot do your job. I cannot do your job. I am not a good first grade teacher. I just am not. Middle school, shaky. I was a pretty good high school math teacher, but there's probably a staff that can do it 10 times better than I can do it. But in this job, one of my jobs is to try to make sure they can do their jobs so they can serve your kids. Does that make any sense? And one of them is to really analyze the district and see where I see its strengths, but also not to ignore places where we have to think about some things. Questions?
So, in terms of the bonds, how indebted is our community now? Have you looked at what other communities would tolerate?
Yeah, I actually have. I didn't bring it with me. I don't have a slide for it here. We're discussing that with the board. The board asked us for different metrics, in terms of comparable districts. And we actually have it should be on our web in the board materials that we sent out yesterday. We're going to be discussing that at the Tuesday night board meeting. Okay? And I have these big charts and color and where we rank in terms of all of them. The question, when you ask the question, is when you say how do we rank, it depends, under what category how do we rank? So we gave about 10 columns, so you can say, you can look at it this way, this way, this way, this way. But for the most part, in terms of overall debt per student, which is kind of the general way I would look at it, all districts similar to ours, we're just right in the middle kind of area. We're not high and we're not low. And it's also complex in that different districts have chose to fund things different ways. Okay, so some will take, and I'm just talking about this district just on. This district, historically, when they do a bond, it's on a 20-year, think of a 20-year mortgage on a house. They do 20 years, is what they typically do in this district. Some have done 30 years. Some have done 50 years. Now, when you do that, as you know, just with a house, the amount of interest that you're paying, the longer you pay it out, the more interest you're paying, right? So they're not always all equal, but you can kind of see it on these charts. I'm going to be happy to get them to you if you want. Okay, in fact, if you email me, I'll email them right to you if you want. Okay. I didn't bring them here. Yes?
So how does EEF play into it? So if you take out the 5 teachers, can EEF pick those 5 teachers up?
Well, okay, so I have EEF in the chart right now. I have them clipping along at about $1.4 million coming in. If EEF...
Do you take that question
Every word.
What EEF is gasoline in the plane, right? So if EEF's numbers changed from 1.4 to 6.2, right? Yeah. Changes the graph. It's just a lot more money. But I had to put something in, so I put a base.
But that's a dollar for dollar.
Yeah, it's dollar for dollar, but it's in the model.
Now I know why the tutu's worn.
Pardon?
Now I know why the tutu's worn. That raised money to give to make
yeah. But it's a good question. Other questions? By the way, if you want to ask me anything about non-finances, I'd love to talk about it. I really do know a little bit about education, too. I've been in that game more than I've been in this game.
Well, then, you didn't talk about security, and I think we're all concerned about safety for everyone. That's going to cost.
Oh, it does cost. First of all, I'll say that 2 ways. Okay? We could make your schools absolutely secure, but you don't want them. And that's just so strange. Because then you wind up being barbed wire prisons, and that's just, it almost gets to a point of quasi-ridiculous. Okay? Armed guards, frisk everyone, that's TSA for everyone coming in, scans. We could do that, but then it's not school, it's more of a prison. Right? So you have to make a decision what's reasonable. Okay? And reasonable will not give you absolute protection in every situation. It just will not. Okay? Some of the most secure schools have been ones where there have been shootings. Some of the most secure schools, someone has pulled the fire alarm, the kids came outside, and then they shot. So the contingencies that you have to think about, and we do think about all those things I did in Illinois, I think about it here, we do everything we can do, but it also becomes to, do I want to spend such an exorbitant factor that I build a prison, that I have class sizes that are at 50 to 1, because I spent my money there versus the other place. Sometimes one of the best places, particularly with high schools, that you can spend money for security, you know where it is? this is crazy, if you really think about it, but think about it. It's with keeping your class sizes reasonable, keeping your co-curriculars, and having good counselors. Because most of the difficulties, if you've seen it happen in schools, most of them are internal. And if somebody is connected to the kid or knows what's going on in the kid's mind, you stop it before it ever happens. But those are good things to keep in the back of your mind. But because you can put, it's something I do think about. But I do think about. But you're right, it has a cost. But you also have to think about it, I think, in terms of. I do think you have to think about it in terms of reasonable and what is the right amount to spend. I tell you, when I look at this district, you're in pretty darn decent shape. People have thought about it here. They have thought about it here. Other questions? Can you go economics, not economics? So I bored you to death. I took a lot of your time. Here's the thing. My mom told me clearly when I was growing up, you're not the brightest guy in America. No, she did. But then she immediately said, you're not the dumbest either. Now you haven't met my brother. Now, but she meant it in the nicest way. No, she did. No, she's a good, I like my mom. She's a really good person. If there's places where there's mistakes, I want to figure them out. Remember I started out, the first thing I said to you, I'm in the learning mode. I'm still in the learning mode. I don't think I figured it all out. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. In fact, we did this presentation a couple months ago somewhere at the high school. It's changed dramatically since then, just because we've learned more things since then. So they asked us to come back and do it again. So we are. But I want you to know this. I'm not the brightest guy in America, but I will work hard and I will try. I promise you I will do that. And I do thank you. I'm sorry I may be a little depressing, but again, I'm not going to be Pollyanna. And I thank you for your time. I'll stick around if you have any questions.